everyone. My name is Jesse Beach. I'm the chairman of the GAPWG, or the PBS Working Group. In this episode of the Video Bid Line Bulletin, we're going to be talking about bad bids. So, starting off with the very top bid group here, it starts off with this pilot looking for basically commutable type pairings, and they also have a few extra restrictions on there they don't need. Starting at the top, using a set condition max credit window is fine, but using it with an LSTART next makes it somewhat of a restrictive bid, and it can't be denied in that particular bid group. So it's not something that we would recommend, so we would uncheck that, and that way it can be denied in that bid group if needed. If you were going to use it, you would just want to make sure that you had a backup below it. Same thing with the pattern bid here. Although they're looking between 3 and 5 days on with 3 days off minimum, they have an LSTART next there. So essentially, if that pattern can't be honored every single time that working block of days happens, then that particular set condition would be triggered with the LSTART next. So instead, we'd remove that. Last but not least, this pilot used a set condition minimum days off in a row of 3. That's actually not the proper way to waive your minimum days off. You're going to need to make sure it says the waive command. So we're going to delete that and go to add, and we're going to use waive minimum days off, and we can say 3. Hit apply, reset all, close. Continuing down this bid group, again, they were looking for commutable pairings. If you only use pairing check-in time after 10, what that's actually going to do is say any pairing that checks in after 10. So that could be anything from a day trip, a 2-day, a 3-day, or a 4-day. So it's actually not the proper way to bid. Same thing we see just below. This could be any trip that checks out before 1800. Another thing we see is pilots will use en route check-in time. The en route check-in time can be used, of course, but all that means is the middle days of the pairing. So if we're talking about a 4-day pairing, you're only talking about days 2 and 3, and that's it. So these are not the proper way to bid for commutable pairings. Down here, these lines are the way to do that. So what we can do is copy and paste these up here. We have further material on how to do that properly continuing on. Now, continuing on to bid group number 2 here. This particular bid group, they did waive their minimum days off to 2, but they essentially bid out of order. So they did bid for commutable pairings, but what would happen is they would ask for all these pairings, and let's say we got to line 13. It could complete a line here. It would never look at anything below this. So that's not the order that we want this to happen. Normally, the order that you want things to happen are your blue set conditions at the top, then your negative statements, which are prefer, off, and avoids, and then award statements below that. So we're going to move these down, and that way it can try to honor the prefer off weekends, the avoid pairings if deadhead legs are greater than 0, so avoiding deadheads. Now, this is another gotcha here. On this line, we avoided any sit length less than 2 hours. Obviously, most pilots would be looking for sit lengths for less than 2 hours, so we're actually want to avoid sit lengths greater than 2 hours. So that's something to pay attention to, which way that caret is going. And this is just a little bit of a trick. Okay, so anything, avoid anything with a red eye. If we check edit here, we'll show you the way to add that last bit. If you click on red eyes itself, you can include counting deadhead legs. That way, just in case the actual deadhead itself is a red eye, it will avoid that. Now, you can do this right here. So in this case, let's say you'd be willing to take any of these commutable type pairings if they had a red eye. This particular way to bid this would be okay. You would just have to know that any of these pairings, if they are awarded, could be awarded with a red eye. You could also move this line just up and down just a little bit here as well. All right, continuing further down into the reserve bids. Okay, so looking at the first reserve bid group, all this pilot bid for is long haul reserve. They also only used a set condition minimum days off in a row of 2, so we need to fix that. We'll delete that. And going back to waive minimum days off to 2, apply, reset all, close. So the problem with this bid is if they didn't use the waive command here, the prefer off weekends I'll start next, there's no way you can get every single weekend off if you don't waive your minimum days off. So this bid group would be skipped just based on that. Now that they have waive minimum days off to 2 in there, it is possible. The next problem is they only bid for long call reserve. So the way this bid would process is, let's say you did get every single weekend off. It would say, okay, can this pilot be long call reserve? If the answer is no, then what would happen is it would start to look for the next possible reserve wraps. If you don't have any, it's just going to select one for you. All right, next issue down here. All this pilot selected is set condition R03. So again, if they were able to get this 1 weekend off, they didn't waive their minimum days off, so 1 weekend is okay. But if they didn't get R3, the system would start to look for the next 2 wraps in that base. So since there isn't any, it would select whichever one that it wants. All right, next bid group here. Set maximum days on in a row of 4, else start next. All right, well, you can't only have a max days on in a row of 4 unless you waive your minimum days off. As you know, typically with reserve, if you don't waive your minimum days off below 4, you're going to at least have some type of 6 on, 4 off, 6 on, 4 off, 6 on, 4 off cadence. So in order for a set condition like this to work, you're going to have to waive your minimum days off. We would also recommend not using an else start next with a line like that. That way, if you did have to go over 4 days with one of your work blocks, you could do that. And again, you would want to bid all of the wraps in each bid group. With using prefer off weekends like this, there's no problem with that. It can just deny which one it needs, and it'll try to give you as many as you can. Last but not least, this is the proper way to bid reserve. We have another video on how to get long stretches of days off and bid reserve properly, but this last bid group is the proper way to do so. We thank you for watching this edition of the Video Bidline Bulletin. We look forward to see you again on the next one.